Suki Hotu, and welcome to the Buddhist Maha Vihara's Facebook page. We are going live this evening here from Buddhist Maha Vihara. And this evening, I'm actually very excited. And I've just come back from a pilgrimage in India. It's called the Footsteps of the Buddha. And we spent 12 days visiting all the famous sites in India. And now I'm feeling very recharged and inspired to carry on the Dhammadana series. And upon coming back, we have invited this very erudite and knowledgeable monk from Australia. His name is Bante Akaliko, who is joining us this evening to keep us sane and away from all this political rhetoric that's going on currently in Malaysia because of the general elections. And I hope Bante Akaliko will help abate all this nonsense that's happening around the country at the moment. Without much ado, I'd like to invite Bante Akaliko to the studio to join us. Good evening, Bante. Welcome to Buddhist Maha Vihara's Facebook page and our Dhammadana series.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be here. I feel like it's a bit weird. Here I am at the Maha Vihara and so close and yet so far from all of the people watching.
Yeah. Actually, we were supposed to have in person and live at the Buddhist Maha Vihara talk. This talk was supposed to be at the Buddhist Maha Vihara today, but because of the elections that I mentioned, and everyone is having to travel back home to cast your vote, so we thought the best thing we would do is to have it online instead. And Bante has graciously accepted to do it online. For those of you who are not very familiar with Bante Akaliko, let me just quickly read Bante's profile. Bante Akaliko is an Australian monk in the Theravada forest tradition. He is the spiritual director of Little Dust and founder of Rainbow LGBTQIA+ Buddhist community in Australia. Bante Akaliko is also the spiritual advisor of the Central West Buddhist and also a chaplain at the Western Sydney University. He sits on the boards of the Buddhist Council of New South Wales and the Federation of Australian Buddhist Councils. Bante Akaliko received full ordination with Ajahn Brahm. Everyone knows Ajahn Brahm at the Bodhinyana Monastery in 2017, and later lived for several years with Bante Sujato at the monastery at the end of the world in Sydney. Now, Bante Akaliko now lives as a wandering monk and looking for a place to settle and shake off the dust. Well, he's here in Malaysia at the moment on a tour in Buddhist Maha Vihara is one of his stops, and we're very happy to have and glad to have Bante here with us for 2 weeks to conduct some retreats and also this talk here at the Buddhist Maha Vihara. So without much ado, I would now like to invite Bante to start this evening's Dhamma sharing. It's entitled How to Heal Your Hate and to Be Happy. Bante?
So once again, thank you to Leslie and to all of the people organizing events here at the Maha Vihara. And thank you, all of you, for joining tonight. It's great to be with you here. So I just begin by reciting the Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So yes, tonight I'm talking about hate, which is something that the Buddha frequently talked about. And it's one of my favorite subjects too. One of the reasons I enjoy talking about hate is because it's such an important thing for us to come to grips with in our own minds, to see clearly this defilement of hate, to understand how it arises, to understand how it ceases, and why the Buddha told us that hatred can never be appeased, by hatred. Only by love is hatred appeased. This is an eternal truth. This is from the 5th verse of the Dhammapada. And in this short verse really is so much of the Buddha's teachings on hate and love. So tonight, I hope that I'm going to get towards the love part, where we understand just what it means to have a mind of love, a mind that is free from hate. But really, I want to focus on the hate, how it arises, why it arises, what it feels like when we've got it in our mind, and how we can let it go. And so when I think about hate, I know that it pops up quite a lot in the Buddhist sutras in different forms. So many of you will be familiar with words like dosa. This is hatred, one of the 3 root defilements. We also have words like bhayapada, which is ill will. And this pops up in many lists of defilements. For example, it's one of the 10 samyojanas, 10 defilements. It's one of the 5 hindrances. It has it comes up in many lists of the kilesas and more. We have other words too, like koda, anger, agata, resentment, patiga, which is resistance or grudge. And these are all lists, all words that we find synonyms for hate, ill will, and these are, the Buddha told us, bad. These are something to get rid of. This is something we don't want in our mind. And throughout his teachings, the Buddha tells us over and over again why these are such bad things to have in our mind. But I'd like to acknowledge at this stage that anger, ill will, is also a natural part of being human. And it's understandable that these things appear in our mind. And so I think one of the challenges for Buddhists is to firstly admit that this is something that happens to us. Does it happen to you that you get anger, ill will, resentment in your mind? If you do, it's okay. The only people, the only beings who don't experience something like ill will or anger are enlightened beings, specifically the non-returner and the arahant. Even a stream enterer still experiences ill will. Even a once returner still has some ill will in their mind. So I actually take comfort from this, knowing that it's not easy to extinguish these things in our mind, and that while we remain less than almost fully enlightened, we're still going to have some ill will. And so for me, we have to be very careful as Buddhists that we don't fool ourselves into thinking that it's not there. Just because we do a little bit of metta meditation once a week, or just because we do some prostrations, this doesn't mean that our mind is clear of this defilement. So one of the problems for Buddhists is perhaps appearing as though we don't have ill will or anger in our mind, when we're actually just repressing it, suppressing it, putting on a bit of a spiritual performance. When people come to me saying, oh, I've got so much anger in my mind, it's like, very good, very good. At least you're aware that it's there. At least you're not pretending that it's not. At least you've seen it, because that's much better than not knowing that it's there or covering it up. It's much better to acknowledge that we have these things like ill will, anger, resentment in our mind. It's much better to know that it's there, because then we can start to work on it. Then we can see just what it does to our mind and why the Buddha instructed us to abandon it. And so think about what goes on in your mind. Think about the various forms of ill will and resentment that might appear. It's good to get to grips or become familiar with the landscape of hate and ill will in our own mind, so that we can see it when it arises. So it can be a very subtle thing. At one end, you might have just mild not liking, a bit of resistance towards something. You might have a lot of irritation, but it's still pretty mild. Annoyance, not wanting things to happen like that. Ill will comes up. Ill will's a bit stronger though, isn't it? Ill will is a mind that really doesn't like something. Then we have hatred. Hatred is really starting to, that idea of not liking something is turned. It's almost becoming more of a kind of force, more of an energy, right? Moves from being something that we might experience internally and something which is starting to appear, and it comes out in things like anger. We have a kind of deeper form of ill will, which is that kind of resentment and grudge, something that is really stuck in our minds and is almost impossible to shift. You know how it is when you have a grudge? It's like that anger or that hate, that ill will that you have is stuck on repeat, and you experience it over and over again, and it doesn't go away. And then we have malevolence, cruelty. And these are when our ill will has overtaken our mind completely and we act out in cruel and hurtful ways. So when we see this spectrum of defilements in our mind, we might hesitate to recognize them occurring within our own minds. We might not want to think that they are there. But as I said, if you examine yourself carefully, if you have mindfulness, if you see these things occurring in your mind, you see how it feels, and you see the results of having those mind states. So tonight, I thought what we'd do is to just look at some strategies recommended by the Buddha to help us understand these minds and what to do about it. So the first thing to recognize is that we have an external object, something outside of us, that causes us to have this feeling of aversion, something that we don't like. And then the Buddha said that the second thing is unwise attention. So we have an object outside, and when it contacts us, we respond with unwise attention. This is ayoniso manasakara. So this is not seeing to the source of things. Ayoniso manasakara is not understanding where things come from, how they arise, what happens if we get involved in it. Basically, it's not recognizing the difference between something that is wholesome and that is unwholesome, something that is skillful and unskillful, beneficial or unbeneficial, bad or good. And so when we have a mind like this, when we're unwise in the way we respond to that external object, it's likely that hate or ill will continue to arise as our mind repeatedly returns to the object of aversion. So our mind goes back to that object over and over again with great rapidity. And that continual repetition of going back to that object causes that aversion to grow and grow and grow. And that's the nutriment for this ill will and hatred to grow, that repeated, unmindful, unwise attention. So this is something that's good to know, that if we can see objects more clearly or in a different way, then we can prevent that ill will from growing. If we have wise attention, yoniso manasakara, if we see into the nature of things more clearly, understanding how things arise, how they pass, understanding what is skillful and good, then we can grow our mind in a beautiful way, unsullied by these kinds of mind states like hate and anger. And so for me, the most important thing to do is to firstly have that mindfulness, have that awareness of what's going on in our mind right now. So that mindfulness is always beneficial. Secondly, we need to have an understanding of the drawbacks of these states of mind. So one of my favorite images from the suttas is when the Buddha is talking about the hindrance, the nivarana, the hindrance of ill will. So he describes this as being like a bowl of boiling water that's bubbling. And this to me really describes the experience of ill will, anger, hate. When you have a mind of ill will and you sit in meditation, you'll see it really clearly. And it's a horrible thing to experience. You see it rising up, just like that water starting to boil, starting to bubble. You see it rising up. You see just how agitated that water becomes. Full of bubbles, boiling, it's hot, it's disturbed, and that's what happens in our mind. Perhaps you've seen that, the kind of disturbance this mind of ill will causes. It's impossible to get any peace. It's impossible to be calm and relaxed and clear when you have a mind of ill will. So this shows perhaps one of the drawbacks of this mind of ill will. Your mind cannot get any peace, cannot get any stillness or clarity. This makes meditation almost impossible. And so this alone we should see as a drawback of this mind. The Buddha spoke in so many different ways about the drawback of ill will. Another sutta, which is one of my favorites, is called the Kodhana Sutta, sutta on anger. And in it, the Buddha talks about 7 things that will please your enemy. So first thing we have to acknowledge is that some of us might have some enemies, right? So we're probably the enemy for someone else as well. Yeah? This is just what it is in this world. We can't get along with everyone, it seems. Some people just don't like us, but sometimes this turns into a real grudge and we might have enemies. So if you have an enemy, then you don't want to make them happy, right? So this sutta, 7 things that will please your enemy, are 7 things that happen to you that will make them happy. And these 7 things all have to do with hate appearing in your mind. So if you get hate in your mind, your enemy will be happy. Firstly, they know they're starting to succeed, right? They'll be rubbing their hands, thinking, yes, good. Hate has appeared in their mind. And what happens when hate comes into your mind? The Buddha said, the first thing that would please your enemy, if you get hate in your mind, is that you look ugly. So this is really true, isn't it? Have you seen when people are getting angry? Their face contorts and becomes red. They look like a toddler or a demon. They look ugly. And so the Buddha said, when you get a mind of anger or hate, your enemy, seeing this, will be happy because you look ugly. So the Buddha here trying to appeal to our sense of vanity, perhaps. No one wants to look ugly, right? And then contrast that with a mind or a face of love. Someone smiling, someone that looks happy and peaceful and serene. So this is a way that we can understand just what it's like to have a mind of hate. We do actually look really ugly when we have anger or hate in our mind. So that's the first thing that will please our enemy. The second is that we won't sleep well when we've got a mind of anger or hate. And perhaps we know this ourselves, right? When something happens to us during the day, we go to bed that night, and we're still bubbling and boiling. That angry ill will is still charging through our body, through our mind. When we try to sleep, we find we can't. The mind is so agitated. Maybe we've been quite triggered by this experience. We go over it again and again in our mind. Once more, we have no peace. We can't relax. We can't sleep. Even if we have the nicest bed, even if we have plump pillows, soft music, we still can't get to sleep. That anger is bubbling in our mind, and it won't give us any peace. So the Buddha said, this knowing that you are not sleeping, this will please your enemy, right? They'll be gleeful. And also, you know what happens when you don't get your beauty sleep? You look even more ugly. So that's the second thing that will please your enemy. The second drawback, if you will. Another thing that will make your enemy happy is that you won't get everything that you need if you have a mind of ill will and anger. You won't get everything that you won't be able to profit. And so you think about it, there's so many ways we can understand this. For example, if you're in business and you're the kind of person who gets angry at your customers, then you won't be able to get money from them. They don't want to do business with you. And so we can see in this case how we won't profit, we won't gain if we have a mind of anger and ill will. And our enemy, seeing this, will be happy. Not only that, the Buddha says, the next drawback, the next thing, is that we will lose our wealth. And the example the Buddha gives is that kings will take away our wealth. And we know this too, just from understanding the court system. For example, if you get angry and you damage someone's car in a road rage incident, then you might get a fine, and maybe even worse, you might lose your job, you might go to prison, you'll lose your wealth. And so this is a consequence of your anger. And this will make your enemy very happy indeed. And then the Buddha says, you will develop a bad reputation. You might have had a good reputation, but if you become angry and irritable, if you're the kind of person who lashes out in hate, then you will lose that good reputation and get a bad reputation. People will say, oh, did you see what happened with so-and-so? You see, he lashed out and got angry. And so people will start talking about us in this way. Our enemy will be very happy indeed. The next thing that happens, well, our friends and family abandon us. They don't want to hang around with someone who is irritable, who gets angry, who has a lot of ill will. You don't want to hang around with angry people either, right? And so this is something to be aware of. Sometimes with the people closest to us, we forget. We forget to be polite. We forget to be kind. We forget to show our best self. And sometimes that means that some of our less desirable qualities come out very easily around people we are familiar with, who we are close to. And when they see this, they will stop wanting to be around us so much. If it becomes very bad, they'll stop wanting to be around us at all. And so we will lose our friends, we'll lose our family. And I've seen this happen in real life. It's also the subject of many dramas and movies. When people behave badly like this, they become isolated and alone, and that will please their enemy. And the last thing that happens when we get angry or irritable is that when we die, we will go to a bad destination. We will have a bad rebirth. Think about it. Our thoughts stain our mind. Our rebirth is dependent upon the tendency of our thoughts, of our intentional actions, speech, and thoughts, our karma. So the more we indulge this mind of ill will and hate, then the more that festers in our mind, the more that becomes the tendency, the preponderance of our mind. And maybe you see people who are old and grumpy, people who are angry and bitter. Remember, they didn't start out that way, but developed this kind of mind over many years, over many incidents, many single incidents of irritation, resentment, grudge, ill will, and anger. And these added up to be something so strong that it became their character, their personality. This is what they'll take with them into their next life. And the Buddha says that people who are angry, people who have do a lot of harm or cruel, who are malevolent, who hurt others, these beings will go to a bad destination. Who knows if our enemy will be around to see that, but the Buddha says that this is something that will please our enemy. And so these are 7 things that the Buddha said would make our enemy happy if we had hate and anger in our mind. And so I see these as really clear instructions from the Buddha about the drawbacks of having a mind like this. If we understand the drawbacks, then we can refer to this idea, this is harmful for me. This will affect myself. It will affect others. It'll harm my long-term happiness. And we can see that it doesn't lead to good results. And so understanding the drawbacks is a really important part of appreciating why we need to let go of anger that has arisen in our mind. It's much better, however, if it doesn't arise at all. But given that we're still human, given that we're not yet a non-returner or a fully enlightened being, it's still likely for some time yet that anger or ill will come into our mind. So, if it does, firstly, we should recognize that there are many drawbacks to this mind. Secondly, the next strategy is to let it go. So you have to be a bit careful sometimes talking about letting things go, because we want to firstly acknowledge that some forms of anger, hatred, ill will are understandable. We don't want to become overly spiritually superior or pious and tell people that they shouldn't be angry, that they shouldn't allow for anger to ever enter their mind. There are some things that really affect us in our life. And there are some horrible things that happen to people in this world. We don't want to judge the way that they react. It's understandable when someone is experiencing abuse or violence, discrimination, that they will have some resentment, some anger, some hostility in their mind. However, eventually, when we're ready, we will need to let it go. No one can force you to let go of anger or resentment. No one will be able to force anyone else to do that either. Time is an essential ingredient in allowing for these things to disappear from our mind. Some things will be very persistent, very difficult to let go. Other things will be easier for us. It won't be the same for other people. We're all different, and we all experience these things in different ways. We all have different skills and understanding of the Dharma. And so when you hear a teacher say, let it go, of course we want you to come out of your anger, come out of your hatred. But don't take that to mean that the things that have happened to you in your life are not important or shouldn't have affected you the way that they did. It's understandable that your mind gets affected by the stuff that happens in our lives. It's understandable that hatred or ill will arises. The difference between people like us and sapurisas or great beings is their ability to let these things go. But we need to see this with wisdom. We need to let go with wisdom, not through a force of will. We can't use willpower to overcome these kinds of mind. We can't just wish them away, pretend that they're not there. Only through wisdom can we let these things go. And so the Buddha gave some great examples about how to let go. And this is a sutta that you can find in the Anguttara Nikaya 3s called the Lekha Sutta. And Lekha means inscription. And so the Buddha compared 3 types of inscription to 3 types of people experiencing ill will. The first is an inscription etched in stone. So this is like a line drawn in a rock, very deep, quite permanent, this kind of inscription. We know from places like Egypt or even ancient India that inscriptions in stone last a long time, right? We see these things that have been there for thousands of years. And so the Buddha said that this inscription that lasts a long time is like someone who gets angry or has ill will, and that lasts a long time in their mind. It goes deep, and they don't want to let it go. It stays there, right? All of you, including me, will have something that you're still really not happy about, right? There's something, someone, that there's still this anger or ill will, resentment and grudge towards. It lingers there, just like an inscription in stone. It's very difficult to erase. So this is the first kind of person the Buddha compared to an inscription. The second is an inscription, a line drawn in the sand. So you can imagine like a line drawn in the sand at the beach. So this kind of inscription, it lasts for a little while, right? But it doesn't last for too long. Soon the water or the wind will erase that inscription. And so there's people like this, and maybe this is also us sometimes. The anger, the ill will, it arises and it stays. But soon we let it go. We might need several waves to wash over that inscription, to delete it permanently. But we let it go. It doesn't stay for a long time like that inscription in the stone. So that's the second. The third is like a line drawn in the water. As soon as it draws, as soon as it's drawn, it disappears. There's no trace. Immediately it's gone. And this, the Buddha said, is the best way to be. When we experience some anger or ill will coming into our mind, we let it go straight away. It doesn't linger. It doesn't stay in our mind. We let it go. And so this is a skill that we can develop. This is a skill. It takes practice. One of the ways that we can develop this skill is by experiencing this kind of mind in meditation. Sometimes you see the way the mind reaches out, looking for a problem, looking for something to hate. We've still got this root defilement, which is why our mind is reaching out. Perhaps we remember something that happened at work that day, something our partner said to us, something from the past, and you see the arising of that hate. You see it affecting your body and your mind. You see that bubbling energy coming into play. And you see it, knowing that the Buddha said there are drawbacks to this mind, knowing the bad results that come from it, it's much easier to let it go, to not get involved. We might let it go and then we'll pick it up and let it go and pick it up, let it go, pick it up. But we get better and better at this skill. And so this is something that I've seen in my own practice, that it's possible to learn. It's possible to see that hate, ill will arise and to not get involved, just to let it go, just like that line drawn in the water. It's very important to develop those kinds of skills, understanding the drawbacks, understanding how we can let it go. It's important to change our perception of things that cause ill will and resentment to arise in our mind. Our perception of people and things is distorted, loaded. We tend to get stuck on a particular view of people, of political parties perhaps, of countries, of all sorts of things, music, food. We have these entrenched views that result from our perceptions, which sometimes are limited and therefore distorted. So the third strategy, which I'll share with you, is to make sure that we balance our perceptions out by accentuating the positives, not getting stuck on one particular view, one particular perspective that might be negative, ill will, hate, resentment, whatever. We want to be able to have a mind that can see beyond those things. We want to see in its totality a person, an idea, a thing. And so when it comes to people especially, we find that this is the case. We have maybe one bad experience with them, maybe we don't like the way they spoke to us, the clothes they wore, the way they eat with their fork, whatever. We stick them in our mind with this negative perception. We have this irritation, ill will, anger or resentment. And so one of my favorite suttas, I think I've said that several times tonight, but this is one of my favorites, is a sutta spoken by Sariputta, the Arahant, who was one of the Buddha's chief disciples. And he talks about how we can overcome resentment towards other people when it appears in our mind. So the simile that he uses is of a rag-wearing bhikkhu. So you can see that I've got my robes on, and at the time of the Buddha, they didn't have these beautifully nice manufactured and carefully sewn robes. They had robes that were made from rags. And so a monk would be looking out on the street for maybe a discarded piece of material or something grabbed from a corpse, and then they'd stitch these together to make the robes. And so if a monk is wearing rag robes, they'd always be on the lookout for some good rags. And so they'd see a dirty rag lying on the street, and they'd carefully spread it with their foot, and they'd see, this portion is good, this portion is bad, stained and dirty. They don't discard the whole rag on account of it being stained. Instead, they understand, I can use this good part. And so Sariputta is saying here, look at the good part, discard that bad part. And so when we have a mind like this, we protect ourselves from the danger that comes from only seeing the bad, only seeing something that makes us irritable and angry. Instead, we focus on the good qualities, and everyone has good qualities. Even our enemies have good qualities. Wouldn't you like them to look at your good qualities too? And so Sariputta gives a series of 5 similes, which I don't think I have time to go into tonight, but they're all pretty much similar to this idea of taking what you can get that is good and positive of a person, looking at the good qualities that they have, not only for their sake. Of course, this will help improve your relationship to them because you're focusing on something differently, perhaps, to how you focused on them in the past. Before, you only saw their bad qualities. Now, conscientiously, you're trying to see their good qualities. And that will change the way you interact with them. So that benefits this relationship. It benefits them because perhaps you make a comment, oh, you're really good at using the photocopier. And they think, okay, I'm good at doing this thing. Perhaps in this way we can grow positive qualities in them, like watering the flowers, not watering the weeds. We pay attention to the good qualities and we don't pay attention to the bad qualities. We don't water those weeds. We water the flowers so that they can grow. So this will bring a good result for them. It'll improve your relationship for both you and them. And it will protect your mind from becoming full of hate and anger. So in this way, it's quite a beautiful idea that it's possible for us to choose our perceptions of others. It doesn't mean that we don't see their bad qualities. It doesn't mean that if people are doing bad things, harmful things, that we don't see it. We don't speak out when we must. It doesn't mean that. We need to see their bad qualities in order to stop focusing on them so that we can see their good qualities too, right? We need to acknowledge those, is what I mean to say. We acknowledge it, and yet we also look at those good qualities. I will share just one more simile from that sutta before we almost finish up. And that is the simile of just how far we should go to appreciate people's good qualities. So Sariputta gives this idea of a person who is hot, lost in the desert. When you're hot and thirsty, you see a cow's hoof print filled with a little bit of water. You're so hot and thirsty, you get down on your knees and you suck up that water from that small little bit, that small cow's hoof print, just a puddle. And this is like us sucking up that person's good qualities, really looking out for them, really trying to see something good in them. This is how far we should go to make sure that we see more clearly a person in totality, not just seeing them through one lens of hatred and anger. So that's another strategy that you can use to help overcome your hate. The last thing I want to share with you before we finish up is to develop a mind of love. And this is not as easy as it sounds. The Buddha gave us very high standards of what a mind of love is. In the simile of the saw, perhaps many of you are familiar with this famous sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 21, simile of the saw, the Kakachupama Sutta. In it, the Buddha says that even if bandits are tearing apart our body, cutting us with this double-handed saw, sawing us to pieces, even then we shouldn't allow for a mind of hate to arise, that we should be full of love, full of compassion, and that we should direct this love to them and use that as a basis for developing love to spread towards the entire world. Exalted and immeasurable, the Buddha says, free from hostility, free from ill will. So this is a very high standard, right? And sometimes it can feel like it's almost impossible for us to get to that stage. And even if we experience something like this, we might find that ill will and anger return to us over and over again. So we try over and over again, just as anger and ill will appear over and over again, we try over and over again to develop the antidote, to develop a mind of love, minds of compassion. The place that we do this, where it really matters, is in our meditation, by practicing metta meditation. Metta bhavana. Bhavana means to develop. When we develop our mind in this way, we're inclining our mind over and over again to this beautiful quality of love. We're seeing it in our own hearts. We're generating it. We're allowing the mind to become infused with love. In this way, we train our mind in love. We see the benefits of love. You feel good. It feels so wonderful to have love in your heart. You feel light, clear. Love is blissful, warm, safe. Love is beautiful. And when we have a mind like this, we want to return to it over and over again. And so, through the practice of metta meditation, we incline our mind, we remind our mind that it's possible to have this mind of love. And so over and over again we train. And meditation is a wonderful, safe place to explore it. And then, when we come out of meditation, your mind has been transformed. It's so much easier to be kind, to be generous, to be good towards others. When you've been practicing metta, even when you see your enemy, that preponderance of love in your mind will still be there. And you find that you can even smile and be nice to someone who previously you hated. So this is the transformative power of metta. And in the same way that those grumpy old people didn't start out that way, but developed that hate and angry mind over time, in the same way, even if we have some hate or anger in our mind now, by developing that mind of love, by being kind, being generous, being a good person towards others, by practicing right speech, developing ethical conduct, and most of all, transforming our mind through meditation, we too can develop that mind so that it becomes a preponderance, so that when we're old, we're happy and kind, and people say good things about us when we pass. And with a mind of love, we're destined towards a good destination. And so I'd love to be able to talk more about metta and how we can develop it, but we're running out of time. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. And if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to stick around and answer them.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you for that excellent sharing. Uh, I don't see any questions from the audience at the moment, but I have one question of personal nature. There are some instances where we meet someone for the first time on, say, an acquaintance that you meet in a certain location, in the office, or in a restaurant or something. And at first glance, you don't like that person, or the other extreme, you actually like that person. How does those emotions or um, feelings appear in us when we don't even know anything about that person we've just met? uh, why do we get angry, or frustrated, or hate even sometimes? I don't know. Or the other extreme will be, you kind of like the person. He's very affable, he's friendly, he's all kinds of good thoughts come to your mind. How does that work, Bante?
Well, the main reason is that we still have hatred, this defilement of hatred in the mind, or we still have desire in the mind. And so when we experience those very strong, they almost feel like impulses. It's almost like reflexive, isn't it? Sometimes like this kind of reflex or an impulse that emerges really quickly. It seems like it happens before the mind even notices it, right? It feels so instinctual.
Yeah, it seems like you've met this person before and you never liked him previously and you
Maybe,
still don't like
yeah,
him. Yeah.
maybe. But actually, what's going on is we still have that defilement, that root defilement there. So we haven't taken it out. And so I guess it can go either way, towards desire or towards um, hatred. Uh, and we also are conditioned beings. And so these feelings that we see arise in dependence upon our conditioning. And this can happen in almost unconscious ways. And so we see this particularly with things like prejudice, where there's a kind of response which is based on things like stereotypes, maybe past experience, uh, propaganda, strong associations. These sorts of thoughts are stored in our mind. We're conditioned by these things, and they are there, and that's what helps to distort the perception we have of that person. And because we're being conditioned so strongly, it can seem like that's who they are. It can seem like that's what they are. And we won't see the process that's occurring, which is that we're not actually seeing that person. We're seeing memories of things that might have happened to us in the past. We're seeing the conditioned responses that we've developed over time. And we're seeing these signs that we somehow put together to construct this version of that person. Which is why, when we're dealing with things like prejudice or discrimination, a lot of the work is undoing this conditioned learning and starting to see people in a different way. And so, yeah, that's what's happening. And when it's someone beautiful, it's the same sort of thing. We've got these ideas, we've got this idea of who they are, which is conditioned, which is being built up over time. It might be the color of their hair, it might be the clothes that they wear, the way they hold their head. It can be these small things that appeal to us, and that over time we've developed a kind of vocabulary of what makes something or someone beautiful to us. That's conditioned. And this is where people start to say things like, I've got a particular type, you know, and they won't entertain any other people unless they match that type, which is, of course, a sure way to suffer. Because even if you find someone that kind of matches, your perfect ideal, it's likely that they're not going to be the person that you thought they are, and that you've seen a version of them which isn't real, doesn't exist. It's just a conditioned process that's happening in your mind. So, yeah, this is what happens. And this is the danger, I suppose, in falling to one side, falling towards a negative perception or wholesome perception without seeing, I guess, in a balanced way. We don't tend to see the good qualities of people we hate. We don't tend to see the bad qualities of people we love, right? And so we kind of get stuck in these extremes of views, and we fail to acknowledge the complex nature of people, the complexities of our existence. And we suffer as a result of that, because these views may change. That person who we're so attracted to might become repulsive to us. So these are not to be relied upon. In the same way, those people who perhaps we had some prejudice or discrimination towards, they might help us out and be really kind to us. So our version of them, based on those conditioned ideas, also turns out not to be true. So we can't really trust it. So that's one of the problems for us. That's why it's good to see people in their totality acknowledging their bad qualities, acknowledging their good qualities. We try to encourage those good qualities, and we try to discourage their harmful behavior or harmful qualities. But we do need to see it. We need to distinguish these things in others, but also, most especially, more importantly, in ourselves.
Thank you, Vante. Thank you for that excellent explanation. Let me see whether there are any questions. Yeah, I think there is one question from the audience. I'll just put it onto the screen for you.
Yeah, this is why war is really, really bad, right? We see over and over and over again that when people are put into a situation where they're encouraged to fight and kill an enemy, that there's something that happens to them, that people lose their humanity. And so that's a real tragedy of war, that people stop seeing each other as human. And a lot of the mechanisms for war, such as propaganda, the training that soldiers undertake, are designed to dehumanize their enemy so that the soldier can harm and kill without going through those emotions of empathy and concern. However, one thing that I remember learning about was during, I think it was World War One, the soldiers reported firing bullets over the head of their enemy. They didn't they didn't want to kill them. They didn't want to be killed either. They were told to fire, but they deliberately chose to fire over the head of the enemy so that they didn't kill them. And they've done studies of things like the way ammunition is used, and they see that people are deliberately firing in a way that prevents death in the armed forces. And when I read that, I was really surprised. And I think one of the reasons at that time would have been that trench warfare was quite new, and you're literally face to face with your enemy over just a few meters, a few hundred meters maybe, of ground, but you could still see their face. And you heard stories perhaps of things like on Christmas Day, soldiers taking a break and playing soccer and things like that. And so it's not entirely impossible to lose, sorry, it's not entirely impossible to lose your humanity. You might save that. But modern warfare is becoming more and more highly trained and more distant from the combatants. And you see things now like drones being used and piloted almost like it's a video game. And I think that's very different from being able to see your enemy and look them in the eye and acknowledge that humanity. And so I think if I was to talk to someone in the armed forces, I would firstly encourage them to use violence and use their weapons as little as possible to protect life as much as they can. And if they must be in the armed forces, um, that they should do as little harm as possible, and that if they could stop being in the armed forces, it might be better for them. If there's things like conscription and compulsory military service where people don't want to be there, or if people are fighting in defense of their own country, for example, if it's being invaded, and then perhaps there's more justification. But I really do despair when I hear people going into the armed forces, um, because it's likely that they'll be put into a situation where they'll have to kill. And we know from returned veterans that these actions affect people in a really deep way and traumatize them in this life. They experience trauma, they experience higher rates of suicide, and they experience drug and alcohol addiction, as well as depression and post traumatic stress disorder. And so, knowing this, I think it would be better if people could avoid this career unless it was absolutely necessary. And if they are involved in conflict, then they should constantly remember the humanity of the other side and try to make sure that their actions don't become inhumane, that they never use cruelty or the kinds of things that are banned by the Geneva Convention. Never torture, never use violence on civilians and things like that. But it is a complicated area, and there are wars being fought all around the world at this time and constantly. And I'm not sure that my advice is going to be listened to, but yeah, war is bad. We should avoid war as much as we can. So there's another question. Thanks, Rachel. Dear Bhante, some children are born irritable, easily angered, even at an early age. Could this be part of their karma inheritance? Well, perhaps it's difficult to know just what is someone's karma. But the Buddha did have a category of defilements called the anusayas. Anusayas. These are like the underlying tendencies, the preponderances of the mind. And one of those is patiga, which is like this resistance, this kind of dislike or kind of pushing away. And this is something that even little babies have. And so even little babies will have this underlying tendency. And of course, then it doesn't take long. Even when we're in the womb, apparently, they've done these kind of studies that say that babies in the womb, they like when mum drinks, I think maybe it was mango juice, but they don't like it when mum eats kale or like a bitter spinach. And so you kind of think, oh, okay, even in the womb, we're starting to make these distinctions. We're starting to like some things and not like others. And so you see even there, or things like apparently babies like some music, and they kind of dance in the womb, and they don't care so much for other music. So even then, we're making these kind of choices from an early age, right? Before we're even spat out into the world. And then we start to, this is the beginning. The Buddha said, birth leads to suffering because we start to like certain things and dislike other things. And so we spend our entire life liking things, disliking things. And in children, it's very raw, right? If they don't like something, if a baby doesn't like, for example, the new food that you're trying to feed it, they'll spit it out and throw it in your face. They'll scream and have a tantrum. If something happens that they don't like, they'll respond in these very visceral ways because they haven't learnt yet to start to manage their responses. They're just trapped in liking and disliking, and it's a very powerful force. They haven't modulated their minds yet. We, as older people, start to have a broader experience, right? We can fit these strong emotions into a broader perspective. But for kids, when they don't like something, it's like that's their world, right? For babies, that's their entire world, and that's why those responses are so extreme. And so that's how it develops. Coming into the world, we then have that dependent origination happening where we come into contact through the senses, and that produces craving and clinging, and this leads to suffering. So I hope that helps. Poor little babies, right? Yeah, they suffer so much, and when you see it happening, it's so affecting, right? When you see a kid, a little baby, crying and angry, it's it should be a sign to us, to try to get out of samsara.
Thank you, Bante. That's a good observation, actually, to get out of samsara watching a baby cry. Okay, I think we don't have any more questions. So let me see, is there one more? Yeah, that's the end of the questions that we have this evening. I think we have a very benevolent and happy audience, so there are not many questions this evening about hatred. Yeah. And so before we end this evening's Dhamma sharing, Bante, I would like to invite you to conduct the Anumodana, please.
Okay, so we'll do the Tawaha for the Devas, and then we'll do the Idam Menyatinam Hotu. Etawata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabe dewa anumodam tu sapa sampati siddhiya. Idam menyatinam hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idam menyatinam hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idam menyatinam hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all come out of hatred and develop minds of love to benefit yourself and to benefit all living beings.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you for conducting the Anumodana. So if you have benefited from Bante Akaliko's Dhamma sharing this evening, there will be more sharings by Bante at the Buddhist Maha Vihara. There will be no online talks. This is the only online talk today. Bante will be at least conducting a few retreats. This Sunday, there's going to be a one-day meditation daily practice at the Buddhist Maha Vihara, starting at 7 a.m. and we are finishing off at 5. And Bante will also have a Dhamma sermon in there, and it's called Dealing with Distracting Thoughts at 10 a.m. Next week, on the 26th and 27th of November, Bante will be having a 2-day meditation retreat come daily practice. And on the 26th, Bante will be talking about generosity as spiritual practice at 10 a.m. And on the 27th, Sunday, Bante will be talking about contemplating death at 10 a.m. At the Buddhist Maha Vihara. So if you have time and you would like to participate in the retreat, please do so this Sunday and next weekend. And or if you have some time, only a little time, maybe you can just attend the Dhamma talk at 10 a.m. on any of these days. More information is available on our Buddhist Maha Vihara website and also on our Facebook pages. So with that, we've come to the end of this evening's Dhamma sharing. On behalf of the Committee of Management and the monks of the Buddhist Maha Vihara, let me take this opportunity to thank Bante Akaliko for taking time off to be with us and to share his Dhamma knowledge, and also to the sponsors this evening for ensuring that we are able to conduct this program, and on to all viewers who are paying attention to Bante this 1.5 hours. Thank you for spending your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you at the Buddhist Mahavihara very soon. Sadhu, and good night.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.